We should be. We should be live. It says I'm live. We're live. We could be live. Hello, welcome to Molten Chat, another Molten Modular, Molten Music Technology event here on the interwebs. I am joined by the Galaxy Electric. Say hello and tell us in the chat if you can hear us and see us. Speak. So hi, yes,
speak
yes, you,
yes,
speak, you, guests. I'll give you a prod.
That's what I told you. I was going to get confused by the chat.
Yes.
Hello. Thank you for having us. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great. So we're just going to twiddle our thumbs for a second, just to make sure people can hear us, and then we'll crack on with this fabulous evening of talk and excitement. In fact, what I'll do, I'm just going to open my beer.
Sounds good.
Fantastic.
Oh man, that sounds excellent.
I know it's a little early for us. Not that we care, but
it is. I know.
Is.
I appreciate it's the middle of the afternoon.
If I suddenly depart, that's probably what I went to go grab.
Yeah, let me do it next to the microphone. Oh, it's all foamy now.
Oh, lovely.
Nice. What kind are you having?
See, look, I'm really good at this, so you can tell. This evening's brew is from Brewdog. It's a pale ale, apparently a West Coast favourite. West Coast. Oh, look, a bit Buchla-like.
Mm-hmm.
See,
I was going to say I'm drinking
there.
tea out of a Moog mug, which I feel like, trying to be Buchla focused, but I have a Moog mug. Oh, well.
It's paradoxical.
There's a lot of good breweries on the West Coast.
So let's crack on then. If they can hear us, let's do it. So this evening we have the Galaxy Electric, who are Augustus and Jacqueline. Do we call you Augustus or Jacqueline, or is it Augie and Jackie, or?
Oh, no, I've never heard that. That's
Gus
great.
and
I'm gonna start calling you Augie.
I mean, we go by Gus and Jax, I would say, to each other sometimes, but like I would say Augustus and Jacqueline works for the show.
Fair enough. We'll stick with that then. So I said, my experience of you to let our viewing public know, because they may not know you, is that you cropped up in my Facebook feed at some point. I don't know, over the past year, I think. And of course, your hair is very noticeable, but your aesthetic is very noticeable. And as it scrolls up your Facebook feed, it's just like, oh, what's this? A sort of a splodge of blue, some, of course, colour coded slightly with the Buchla. And you go, oh, Buchla, bits of tape, a gentleman. What could this be about? And my experience of that is simply that you would turn it on and you'd get this drone, this sound, this thing that just went on and lasted for 10-20 minutes, and it would change your day. So rather than scrolling through the political nonsense and the noise or the bleeps and bloops of Eurorack that tends to come up in the Facebook feed, it's just a nice time. And so if you like, my experience of the Galaxy Electric is that it's a nice part of my day as that goes through, and I can listen to that for 10 minutes, not worry about anything else, and then get on with it. So that's kind of how I came across you. And then very recently you are releasing a new project into the world, which is your Kickstarter campaign to release your latest album, which is very exciting. And there's all sorts of things we can talk to you about that. But let's just start off by telling us a little bit about yourselves. Go. Tell us a bit about yourselves. Introduce yourselves.
I always talk way too much, so I'm going to try to let you talk some more.
Oh, really?
I'm always going to just...
That could also be received as putting me on the spot, but...
No pressure.
No pressure.
I'll out-talk all of you.
Just tell us about yourself. And be entertaining, that's all.
Yeah, just be entertaining. It's no big deal. So let's see. We can talk history. Jacqueline and I are a married couple. We did not start making music right away, but it didn't take long before we just couldn't help ourselves. And I have always kind of I guess since 2001 have been into electronic music. I started off with an Akai S3000 XL and Access Virus B back in the MIDI sequencer computer days. I used to read Future Music magazine, actually, out of the UK. They were very expensive in the United States. But I would buy them because they came with sample libraries, and they were really the only good source of how to make electronic music that I could find. There was like Electronic Musician out of the US, but I didn't find that the information was as good on the like how to, how to set up, how to start, a rig. So
yeah, Electronic Musician always seemed to be very wordy. It was like it felt like a proper magazine. We had like long articles about stuff, as opposed to what do you do? How do you get stuff to work? Which is definitely Futures thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I also found the actual articles to be entertaining, rather than dry. There was always like bits of humor in the articles and things, and I appreciated that. But anyway, talk forever about that. But that's sort of like my background and where I was at when Jacqueline and I met. And what is your background?
Well, I have to say I remember the Future Music magazine being a big part of your life when I met you. I'm not gonna lie. You're very hyped about it. And just your background, your mother is from England, and so the UK connection is strong. And weren't you also like importing records to DJ from England as well?
Yeah. It was a lot of like dark break beats in like the late 90s. It's kind of like slower drum and bass, but like intelligent breaks. Botcha and Scarper, like, I could name a few labels to TCR. It's been a long time since I've
where are you pulling that from?
Been super into that style. Like I don't really DJ anymore, and I don't really even listen to much EDM. But yeah, that was kind of like my entry point into electronic music.
Yeah, I just remember everything being like, oh, you have to import this. Even this magazine I have to import.
A lot of the stuff that I was consuming was coming from the UK. Yeah, media, for whatever reason, Europe in general.
Yeah, so that was really exciting to me, because when we met, I was in college and I was getting my degree in musical theater performance.
Right.
Big theater nerd. But what happened while I was in school is that I started writing music, and we had a new professor come in like halfway through my schooling that was like really young and hip, and he had this like big bulky computer he was like trying to incorporate electronic music, and he was an avant-garde composer, and he was trying to shake things up, and he kind of took me under his wing. He was my mentor, and we created a interdisciplinary program just for me to sort of, I guess, writing music. I don't know. The real thing was that I just wanted to write music. And so he was like, well, this is how we're going to make it like a course credit. And so I would just meet with him, and he would teach me about, avant-garde composition, and he made me notate everything, which drove me crazy.
So this wasn't software based then? It wasn't on a computer? You had to do it by hand? Or?
No. Yeah, I had to do it by hand. Wow. I think there were certain like requirements that he was being told I had to meet.
Sure, yeah.
Because they weren't very hip to things yet. But he helped me get a grant for songwriting through the school that I won. I actually put together a jazz trio because I really wanted to do jazz at the time, but like jazz pop, I guess. And I had to perform to win this grant. And then that's really when we met. You were like, oh my gosh, you're like winning grants and songwriting and all this stuff. I'm like, I just started doing this.
Yeah, but you had already accomplished that.
Me. Yeah, like
and you had a little demo CD, I remember, that impressed me.
That was all part of this whole program that he was a really big part of me, like pushing that forward, because I was just hiding in practice rooms late at night, like writing music on the piano and, making my friends come in the practice room with me and being like, is this a song? And they were like, yes, you should play that for people. You should go to places that you can perform.
I remember I needed a lot of pushing into it. We had to break in.
I would break into the practice rooms because, I wasn't inspired till it was late at night, and I figured out how to break into the practice rooms. But I wasn't doing that. And, just being an emotional teenager and trying to express myself through music, and outside of this like very strict theater program where all you're doing is singing other people's music and doing what the director tells you to and all that kind of stuff. And so I think I had enough of that, and I wanted to explore my own sounds. And so that was my, how I went from like, just being a trained singer, piano player, because I did that my whole life, to pushing my way into this more avant-garde, writing my own stuff world. And then when we met, he was, the electronic music producer as I met him. I don't know if you would call yourself that. That's why I use the quotations.
I dabbled.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's an impressive line, though, in a bar, I imagine. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Electronic music
really
producer. Don't you know?
I don't think I called myself that. Yeah.
Someone, your friend may have said that, but
okay.
You were kind of quiet, I remember. But it was like, oh yeah, let's see if I can produce some of this stuff. Let's make it even weirder and make it electronic. And I was just like, whoa, this is blowing my mind. I don't think I had really been in a proper studio like that. And so that was really it. We met, we started working on what music I was working on and having him produce it. And it didn't go very well.
Oh.
Well, it was because we were trying to
like jam things together that didn't really,
yeah.
Because I was like, this is how I want things to be. This is what this is my little box that I understand.
Yeah.
About
I was going to
things.
say square pin into round peg.
Yeah.
Or
whatever.
Round hole. Yeah, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bit of tension there. So it was like, you know what? We're dating now. So, let's do our own music projects. We shouldn't, we've heard enough stories of fame and relationships and all these things. This is a bad idea. Let's just, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. But when you spend all your time together and all you want to do is make music, things happen.
Yeah. And they should. I mean, that's a beautiful connection to have, I think, in a relationship. I think many of us, it's a one-sided thing. It's a lonely road often, particularly for electronic musicians, So to find someone who has complementary ideas in that way, I think is pretty awesome. Rare, even, you could say.
I think you're right about that. We feel pretty lucky, especially because of how we've come to a place of developing and exploring together, sort of like a parallel path. It's pretty awesome. And yeah, it's pretty fun. And yeah, it's kind of like we're at the point now, because we've been together quite a while, where it's sort of shorthand, We don't have to like find our way into the work. We're already in it all the time.
But I would say that like even in the past year, we've really found, I would say, even more common ground. I think it's a good segue to talk a little bit about our Facebook group, the Cosmic Tape Music Club.
Yes.
Which we founded about, has it been like a year and a half or something? About a year. Yeah. So not very long, but we founded it as a way to explore early tape musicians, from around the world. And we used to cover one per week. We would like just pick, Pierre Schaeffer or Stockhausen or
Delia
Derbyshire, Raymond Scott. Yeah. On the American side, like we would, just cover somebody sort of in detail and have like a little, I kind of refer to it as like almost like a drunk history style, like account of what these people, these people's contribution to tape music. There's a great book by Ian Helliwell called Tape Leaders that has, kind of covered all of the UK based tape musicians. So we pulled a lot of resources from that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book. I wish I had it to show.
Yeah, that's a great resource. And he also kind of covers a lot of tape musicians from around the world in his...
right. What is that called?
What is that called? Yeah.
Or his radio show about tape music.
Yeah. Don't have the title on that.
For the uninitiated, like myself, I suppose. So tell us more about tape music, because tape music is something that you're very into, as we understand it. But for someone who's not familiar necessarily with tape music, what does that involve? What does that mean? How do you define
Oh,
that?
you're looking at me. Well, our club is called Cosmic Tape Music because early electronic music, as we understand it in our, layman's education about it, they started by using magnetic tape, right? There were no computers or synthesizers. So what was called electronic music was actually tape that was being manipulated.
So are you talking about, rather than using tape just as a recording medium, as an end product, you're using tape as part of the instrument?
The studio is the instrument.
Yes.
Test equipment.
Yes, test equipment was a big part of
or
it.
sound sources. Any recordings that were made, field recordings, and basically anything that could be manipulated into music.
Yeah, so you might do something like you would record a tone, and then maybe splice that out and change the speed to change the pitch, and then create a sequence. Very painstaking process, but you create sounds that don't exist otherwise, that no one had ever heard at that point. Which the BBC Radiophonic Workshop created the soundtrack to many people's childhood TV shows, so seems to be very familiar with that sort of what that sounds like, but maybe not the process of how it was made. So that was actually called electronic music at the time. So this is what we call the space age. So mid 50s through late 70s, just to the edge of the 80s, but we like to just kind of cut it off there. This is, the era. So we call it cosmic tape music because there was a big influence from this idea of going to the moon, exploring space. Would we live on Mars? What would that look like? What would the soundtrack to that be? And a lot of the songs have space-themed names. I mean, Tom Tisevelt is a big one that comes up too. So all of and he was backed by the Philips Corporation, and they were creating, technology for maybe less positive purposes, but they had this electronic music studio, and they would apparently take people on tours of the music studio and give them a record. And I forget exactly what it was called now. I have too much information in my brain at this point. It was like something about the moon, going to the moon. And it was like, hey, take this home with you. Think about this when you think about Philips, groovy, soundtrack to your trip to the moon. We're going to live on the moon one day.
Yeah.
Kid Buchla.
Yeah. Don't look at the warheads we're building over here.
Right.
Yeah, Kid Baltan.
Baltan. Yeah, that's right. Dick Raymakers. That was his
Dick
pseudo.
Raymakers and Tom Tisevelt worked together. Anyway, we could
No, they were
go
the same
on and
person.
on and on. So each week we will take one of these innovators and do a deep dive, and then all week in the group we share the music or videos, whatever we can find. A lot of people will say like, I remember when I first heard them as a kid, or I have their records still. People having original copies of things and or personal experiences. So that's really, the club is there for people who are like either want to learn about it, obviously, or are super passionate and haven't had anybody else to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'd say we get a lot of like, thanks for this new one. Like a lot of people
Or
like
hadn't heard of that person.
Yeah, we have kind of enlightened them.
It's such a deeper well of people than I even thought when we started. I just keep digging and there's no end to it. But anyway, so that's, tape music as electronic music. But then obviously with the Porta Studio, cassette and, making tape loops, and it just kind of goes from there. So the umbrella keeps getting wider for us because that's everything we incorporate into our music making process as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, my experience of tape is very small, other than using it as recording medium or for taping albums onto or taping off the radio, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Back in the old days. But actually using it has always fascinated me. I mean, I did music technology at university, pre-computer, funnily enough. And
fun.
Well, there was Sound Tools, I think we had, was the only computer thing. So DigiDesign Sound Tools, I think, was around at the time. But we had a Fairlight, and we had tape cutting machines and a Moog modular, things like that.
That's actually the best era you could have chosen.
It kind of was. It kind of wasn't. It was also a bit of a wasteland because you had.
That's true.
most of the good synths, if you like, from the 80s, because this was early 90s, and we didn't really know what was going on, I don't think, in music technology at that point. I think old machines from the late 80s were being grabbed by house music and dance music and being used, which was fantastic, but there was nothing really coming in to replace it. You had things like the Korg M1, which were beautifully digital and beautifully faceless and impossible to do anything with.
I have experience with that one.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. The interface was the worst.
And so we were kind of in a, I don't know, it was a bit of a no man's land, which, I mean, for most of us, we all turned back to guitars and indie music and, had a sort of a Britpop re-emergence. If either that or you were taking ease down the club and, you were comatose for most of the year. So those were your choices. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So about tape, I was always fascinated by the idea of editing tape because it just seemed it was destructive, so destructive. You actually sliced up a piece of tape that you had recorded to, which would blow my mind. And it wasn't, and I've always felt like that. And it wasn't until I was on computers in the late 90s and started copying and pasting audio that, like, all that anxiety about destroying my recorded medium vanished and disappeared, and I could finally copy and paste that one guitar riff I did right, and I felt like my whole world had opened up, which is why in some ways it's fascinating that now we seem to be coming back much more to this idea of destructive music, in that we're leaving our computers behind, or at least that's certainly been part of my journey, and we're embracing this idea that music is immediate and then it's gone, or it's there, it's something beautiful, but then it deteriorates and it disappears. And that's quite fascinating. And I think tape somehow definitely hooks into that idea. Would you say? Do you see it as a destructive medium?
So did you have a thought on that?
Go for it. I have millions of thoughts all the time.
Well, I'm interested to hear about that.
I
think
usually
it does
put
have
lots of
something
words
to do with-
together.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
I think, just mentioning that, we live in a overly saturated digital world has devalued, the artifact of sound, I guess. So the desire is, I would say, twofold, in that we want to get back to using our hands, and having a tactile experience. And also just this idea that there is so much music to listen to all the time. There's so much to experience and there's so much to create. And because we're so used to creating these digital files and messing with them and, copying and pasting and cutting them up and throwing them away and then never listening to them again, right? There's just like this, now I have hard drives full of stuff I'm never going to mess with. Personally, I just feel this sense of like, I don't care so much about being destructive anymore with physical objects, with tape specifically, I think, because it's just changed my brain a bit to have, this inundation of digital files that, they just don't have any value anymore. To want to make a mess of things and play around and then not really worry if it lives on forever, right? Because this idea of like, okay, I'm going to take all my CDs now and I'm going to put them in iTunes, and then like they took that away from us and now we can't access our files anymore. So it's like, I just kind of got used to like, oh, that hard drive is corrupted. I can't access those files anymore. Over the years, at first I was so precious about backing everything up and keeping all my digital files. And so now I'm at the point where I'm like, well, my phone updated, I lost all my stuff. Oh, well, you kind of just, something about the digital world, which I didn't expect, is that it got me used to not being so precious about things. That was the thought I had.
I have become addicted actually to the limitations that this destructive tape provide, in the sense that, like, for all of us computer era electronic musicians out there, I mean, how many times do you open up a fresh session and you have every plugin and you have every sound and you have every sample that's ever existed, just at your disposal, even if you have like the program Reason, which is where I first started with electronic stuff, it's like literally like every sound is just right there. And, like, it's begging for writer's block, honestly. Like, I mean, I spent years where I would just like start a beat, or whatever, like, cut up a little break beat and, start something and then add like the same more or less the same bass line to it. And that's a track, like, and I'm supposed to like continue and finish that. I had a hard time finishing things.
Yes.
In the computer world. So like for me now, it's like, for example, the album that we just recorded, we did completely improvisationally. And we used loopers that were synced, so they were at least in time. And we would record, like synth improvisations to the loopers, and then of course Jacqueline would sing, and so we would sort of build entire songs on the fly and then record them directly to 1/4-inch tape. But even like I would say lately, I'm getting into the idea of asynchronous looping, where I have like 2 or 3 tape machines that all have loops that are completely out of time. And I'm starting to get addicted to that, like, just the idea that it's like so random, and, I never know what I'm going to get. And I'll just start chopping up, like random bits of tape. And, I'm even more happy, I would say, with something that, it seems completely weird and off time and offbeat. And, it's like, I've like gotten to the place where I've like completely abandoned synchronization, where I wouldn't even necessarily want to do synchronized loopers for something we would do in the future. Like I'd rather just,
there's something that comes out of the chaos that you cannot get that result by,
it feels magical,
going into it with a controlled environment. It just won't happen. So now we've had a taste of that. We're kind of addicted.
So which do you think is the last to go? Is it the clock or the pitch, which ends up being the one you hang on to the longest?
Oof, that's a tough question.
I would say,
I'm curious what we were going to say, and see if we're on the same page.
I would say that clock.
Yeah, I was going to say pitch.
Well, that's exactly how it should be. Yeah, that's how
we've got nothing. No, we've either got everything or we've got nothing.
Yeah, it's funny to say though too, because like as much as we're like we have this shorthand and we work together so easily now, we're actually always coming at things from a completely opposite perspective. So somehow that works well, I think.
Yeah, we definitely have like a yin yang thing.
But we have, it's like, I'm holding the tail of the elephant and saying it's one thing, and he's got the leg and whatever. But
that opens up for all possibilities. I mean, that's the key thing.
I think it's better.
One little story I've got about clock or tempo is that I was on stage. Sorry, the way I explain it makes me sound far more important than I actually am in this scenario. But I was on stage with a guy called Gerald, who's a dance music producer he's still going from way back.
Yeah, for sure.
And his way of performing has changed over the years, and currently he's running 2 laptops, both running Reason. And I was standing there videoing him, helping him out a little bit. And what he was doing was loading up different projects and different beats on either laptop. And there was no sync. There was no MIDI going between the two. There's nothing going on. This is on laptops. It's not easy. He had to go down and mouse about and stuff. And he was changing the tempo on the fly to sync them up as he felt, as the beat felt, as opposed to it being locked to anything. And the same, he'd be running the Boutique TR8 and other little drum machines alongside, and as I say, none of it was synced. And I was like watching for about 10 minutes before it sort of dawned on me that none of this is synced. He keeps just adjusting little bits, and it would slowly go out and then he'd pull it back in. And that was fascinating. And that's in a completely digital situation, and yet sync was something that was irrelevant to him because he could do it. He could do it with his own soul was how he did it, which was fascinating. Totally fascinating.
I love that. That's really cool, and a lot harder to do, I would say, with the type of music that he does, than what we're talking about.
We are not slave to any kind of rhythm. or keeping any flow whatsoever.
Right. Or you just get used to like saying like, okay, this chopped up bit, ended up being, kind of rhythmic. So the other things we add to it have to maintain more of an ambient sphere, and this is really like we're not talking about like the drone, if we kind of go backwards a little bit and talk about how the drone came about. It is something that we've found very helpful. Like we did it for selfish reasons, to be honest, because we sort of needed the same thing that you described that the drone did for you. We needed that in our day. And, it was sort of something that we stepped outside of what, the type of music that we normally do to do it. And it came out of like wanting to both, like, I was like, let's do something where we both, have like a Buchla or synthesizer, oscillators, and, let's do something that we can kind of completely abandon, the loopers and everything and the synchronization. Let's, kind of like collaborate on something that involves like pure sound, and like try to like meld that into something that is soothing and calming, for us to have in our day, and and we'll share it, and like hopefully others will enjoy it as well.
Yeah, that was the crazy part. Is we were just doing it for ourselves, and we thought, well, we might as well, make a video of this if we're doing it, and it became like one of the most popular, enthusiastically viewed, like people begging us to do it again kind of thing, and we were just like,
it's always that thing, by the way.
That's so crazy.
It's always the thing that you barely even
we were like,
did,
yeah, this is just something we want to do. Let's try it. No real.
The most casual
there.
approach is always the one that like people seem to latch onto.
No, it was very cool to hear what you said about it though, because I've been curious to kind of put it into words for what is it doing for people that it is, making such an impact. And so now I know. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I've had a couple of other people on my chat, Helen Vogelsinger and Panic Girl. I don't know if you know those two. There's a blue hair connection, but we weren't going to mention it. But one of the things that, there's a couple of other performers as well, Ryan and Jewel Tricks as well. But anyway, what I mean is there's something in the look that happens when you're scrolling, because we have all this information scrolling all the time, and something needs to make you pause, and kind of the only asset you have really in that environment is yourself, is either how you look or how you put yourself forward. And when those artists turn up in my feed, they just make you want to stop and look. Helen is always in some strange dilapidated building somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Panic Girl is always just looking fantastic and has the most extraordinary synthesizers behind her. And Jewel Tricks, I know, for instance, just has these amazing shots, as does Rain. He uses this light within his Eurorack. So the colours in it are just amazing. Because otherwise you have this noise of synth after Eurorack, after political statement, after meme. And so you need to have something which makes you pause. And you definitely have that. I mean, you have an extraordinary aesthetic. It's something that, I mean, I've enjoyed all of your conversation spaces that you've been posting recently, little things like that. Are just they just stand out in your day amongst the noise, and I think that's how it works. And I don't think you can conjure that up either. I don't think it's right. I'm sure someone has an algorithm that could work it out, but mostly it just is you, and you're either something that you pause at or not, and I think you've nailed that. I think you nailed that nicely. Should I throw some in? Right, I've got some lined up here, I think. Now, this is where my technology all goes wrong, but I'm just going to give everyone a minute or two of one of your videos. Would that work all right? Great. And then after that, we'll get stuck seriously into the gear side of things. Yeah. We'll talk Buchla and
oops. And I did the thing I promised I wouldn't do, which is knock everything around.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, so I'm going to pretend that this is just going to work.
That's what we usually do.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Other people in this chat are saying there's no sound, so I'm just going to have to think hard, press that button, because that's I mean, it's a lovely thing to look at, but obviously
Wasn't sure if it was just us.
Yeah, we
no
don't hear
sound. People are saying, "Oh, rats."
It's an hilarious thing to look at, honestly, like without sound for us. Oh man.
You can see the sound on the oscilloscope. We have like a faint bleed of it. That's about it.
So it could be that sadly that was without sound. Gosh, that's annoying. So I thought I had that sorted. See, it sounded great where I was. Could you hear it at your end?
We couldn't. No.
I could hear a little bit of the bleed.
There's a bleed.
That was it.
See, that was nice for me. But not any good for anybody else. So what was that not working then? That because if that was a thing, and then no, I don't want to sit here and try to troubleshoot myself. That would be a shame. But anyway, go and check it out on YouTube, right? In fact, I'll give you the link. So after this, you can go and enjoy that. Yeah, as Frank says, you could stick it in another tab. So from there we wanted to talk about the gear. So from the, I mean, I can throw this image up, which is quite good actually. So we can see in that picture you have what appears to be the blue of Buchla knocking about. You've got a nice oscilloscope and a couple of Space Echo pedals. Is that
this is sort of version 2.0.
Yeah, this is 2.0 of kind of different than what I even described, because it started out where we both just had an oscillator. We actually wanted to even try to do things without patching at all.
No patches, just oscillators.
Yeah. But then it evolved into what you just showed, and we're happy to talk about that setup.
We can't sit still for too long. So we were doing this every week for quite a while. And so after a while, we started to get different ideas, especially too being informed by the people we were studying,
right? Like
Pauline Oliveros, who has a whole deep listening institute. And so the ideas just sort of evolved over time. And, you know, a lot of what she does is with voice as well. And I was like, that's what I do. So that's something that's coming organically out of me, you know, speaking of just doing things that are you. And the idea of making sound, this is something Joan LaBarbera, who's married to Morton Spotnik, also a Buchla hero of ours. She is talks a lot about too, making your voice sound like other instruments. And so I'm very fascinated with making my voice sing with the synthesizer.
Yeah.
And sound like an oscillator, you know, and all of these things. So that sort of started happening, just something we were doing. And then we were like, all right, I think we have to break our own rules about the no patching drone and just start doing this and see what happens. And it went pretty well. So we were like, all right, we'll just keep following our ideas with this.
So the setup involves basically what you see behind me, but it's kind of, I'm actually getting a bigger case. It should be arriving. It's already been commissioned and everything, but it should be arriving within like the next month or so. At least I hope it will. But anyway, it's going to be kind of similar in the sense that like this is based off of a Zero Halliburton case. I think it was owned by like a police department or something, and I bought it off eBay, and actually had the frame made by a guy on Muffwiggler. You know, like the Buchla scene is pretty close knit. Like there are people that, you know, sort of you know, make parts and things for like DIY modules, like clones of the original stuff. And, you know, if we're talking Buchla, you're either talking 200E, which is like the current crop of Buchla USA's modules, or, you know, like the 208C or Music Easel, which is sort of like its own thing. The 208C command just came out, and there's a lot of new Buchla users because of that.
Yeah, they're trying really hard, I think, to connect with less Buchla people, if that makes some kind of sense. If there's a type of Buchla person, which there probably is, which I think is great, because they are mysterious to anyone who's not spent any time with it. It's like, I don't have any idea. We all got hold of the Arturia software version of the 208, and I sit there going, no, I don't know how to use this either. I thought software would be easy, but no, it makes no sense. So I think it's great that they're taking steps towards the rest of the world. I mean, I guess in some ways that's going to lessen the exclusivity of it, but there are pros and cons, I think, to every move. But tell us more about it.
So the 208 is kind of like has kind of become the Buchla gateway drug, if you will, where but for good reason. Honestly, it's got even the system that I have that is individual modules at this point. It kind of emulates in a lot of ways the elements of the 208. The 208 is the stored program. I don't even know the official name of it. But it's, half the easel. It's basically the sound and control voltage side, minus the 218, which is the keyboard, the touch surface. And it has a 5-step sequencer, an envelope generator, attack, sustain, decay, and a pulsar, which is basically a clock, 2 oscillators, which is the typical Buchla oscillator setup. You've got a complex oscillator and a modulation oscillator, which allows for frequency modulation and amplitude modulation, which is a big part of the West Coast sound. Then you've got the complex oscillator has a wave folder, which is kind of like what I like to think of as like the Buchla filter sound. Like it's kind of a unique, they call it timbre on the module. It's kind of a unique sound on its own. And there's wave folders in Eurorack and other formats, but it's a very characteristic sound to the one on the 208. And then it's got the 2 low pass gates, which are another really key element of the Buchla sound, which gives it that, Vactral based, sort of woody decay, very good for percussive sounds. It's sort of the key to the Buchla bongo. And that's all in one module. And that pretty much is like, most big Buchla systems in a nutshell. Like they fit it into one module. So it is a very good place to start if you're interested in Buchla. It's usually the number one recommendation. If anybody, I'm on the Buchla Facebook group and everything. And if anybody ever pops up and says like, hey, I'm looking to get into the Buchla thing, like pretty much always people will suggest a 208. So, the system that I have, and I actually used to have a music easel, and we used it to record our current album that we're about to release.
And we were droning with it as well. Yeah,
we were droning with it as well. I got rid of it very recently because I wanted to expand the system into something a little more elaborate, because like the great thing about the 208 is it's very fast. It's very good for improvisation. You can get into a sound really quick, but it does have its limitations. There are not CV inputs for every little feature, so I wanted to get into a place where I was able to expand, for instance, like it's got random voltage outputs, but they're fixed, whereas the 266, the source of uncertainty module that's very popular, there's actually, control and different types of random and different flavors, and you can control the, the probability and, the different aspects of it. So I wanted to sort of go that route, which required me to sell the music easel, so that I could fund sort of.
It's a sacrifice, it is. It's one of those interesting things in modular is that your stuff, that we cycle through stuff as well. Maybe that feeds back into what you're saying about destructiveness and
absolutely
how we don't we care for our gear, of course we do, but it perhaps isn't as precious to us as these things once were. So that's That's interesting. Do you I get this sense that people who use Buchla tend to stay within that place, whereas us Eurorack users, we will stick in anything that sounds interesting, you would say. So there's a lot of Buchla and West Coast ideas which have been shrunk down to Eurorack size and appear within the patch, within a larger Eurorack patch. You know, do you think the East Coast stuff, I mean, we don't like these terms really, but do those creep into what you do as well?
I wouldn't say they creep into what I do as much, but they are starting to creep into the format. It's not really, that's one of the like no words. Like, it's not really called a format. It's specifically not a format. It's just, you know, there are power standards that you can sort of abide by, and, you know, the panels are a certain, you know, height and width, and, you know, you can make a module that will work in a Buchla case, but it is not considered a format. You know, but that being said, there are, you know, some third-party modules that get into, you know, kind of the East Coast mentality. You know, specifically.
Yeah, what would one of those be?
Well, there's the stuff by Northern Light Modular. I know they have like some like multi-mode filter, like a little half space unit. I think they are developing still a triple oscillator, akin to like, say, a Moog setup. You know, so those are starting to trickle in. That was one of the things I was going to say, is that there are third-party manufacturers starting to make Buchla modules, you know, more and more so. But one of the things that I like about it, and, you know, kind of touching on what you asked, is the fact that there are only so many modules, and it makes it sort of less overwhelming factor, you know, in kind of one of the reasons why I got out of the, you know, just making music on the computer was because of, you know, too many options, you know, and so I kind of like the fact that Buchla is very limiting in that regard, you know, like and the modules all have numbers, which, you know, I'm friends with the guys that that host the Buchla podcast, and we're always chatting back and forth, and, you know, spitting the numbers, you know, 245, 262, you know, 266. I don't think there is a 262. But, you know, and so we're just throwing those out, you know, and, you know,
it's like its own language.
It's like its own language. Exactly. It's like its own code.
Yeah.
But we know
it's
exactly.
Another way to like, set limitations for yourself, but also because, you know, there's a connection to the, you know, the sounds that it makes.
Right.
So it kind of goes hand in hand. It's not like, oh, we wanted to have limitations, so we have to use this. We actually prefer it. Yeah,
exactly. It's not a game stopper for me. But one of the third-party companies, 1979, I have a couple of their modules. They have re-released some of the open source designs from Mutable Instruments. Clouds, rings, and the braids. They've done Buchla versions of those modules. And there were more planned, but I'm not sure what's happening with those. And we have the stereo microsound processor and the digital resonator, which is the rings and the clouds. Very much like those. They weren't around. I actually got started with Eurorack around 2010. I had a small system and sold that to go the Buchla route really early on. Like, I was on like the pre-order list for the Music easel, like around 2013. So I was briefly in the Eurorack game.
What did you start with in your Eurorack
setup? I don't even remember a lot of the modules, to be honest. I know I had that, like, one of the early MS-20 filter clones. Like, that was one of the reasons why I kind of got out of it too, because I was like, basically found myself building a system that equaled like a Korg MS-10. And so I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I could just have a Korg MS-10. Like, this seems silly. It didn't quite hit with me. I only got into it because when we were living in Los Angeles, I was buying guitar pedals at like Big City Music and Analog Haven and these stores that, you know, also, you know, were turning into big modular centers. and, you know, kind of like just, you know, you can't help but poke around and see what else they have, and, you know, got into it that way. And anyway, I had the noise ring by, it was Grant Richards' design. Richter, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Maleko. Remember I had that one. That was a really cool module. That still hasn't really been something that has been recreated for Buchla, and I would definitely jump on something like that. It's similar to the Source of Uncertainty. I think he was actually even inspired by it in making that module, but definitely has, you know, the shift register. It's got some different flavors of random that, you know, the Source of Uncertainty can't do. But I forget where I was going with that. You asked me what the
what your Eurorack
module was. Yeah, let's not talk about that. That was just such a brief. It was such a brief era in our. It was in our trajectory.
You did take it with you when we were playing gigs, though.
Yeah, definitely.
And it did wow people. That was not a very common thing to see on stage at indie rock shows. Was the modular, which I think is.
We weren't even the Galaxy Electric back then. If you really want to get into it.
This in-between phase, we were like doing sort of an indie rock thing, but we were bringing in modular. It was like the sort of like the birthing of the Galaxy Electric.
So, I mean, like, but that segues nicely into performance then. Do you perform stage-wise as opposed to just on video?
Not in these trying times, obviously.
No, but
not doing any performance, but we had been. I think the last time we performed was 2018. We did a couple shows with the band Lake Ruth, if you've heard of them. They were touring. They had an album out, and so we did some shows with them. But what was interesting is that we had our first album, which is much more of a full band psych pop kind of experience with, you know, we had the Buchla on there, and it was sort of like introducing our audience to this sound. And they're very much in the psych pop, baroque pop side of things. And so they asked us to play these shows with them, but what they didn't know is that we had been practicing this improvised modular thing. And so when we played, we opened for them and we did a completely improvised experience that I don't think they were expecting, nor was their audience. And so we had a lot of these like confused faces staring back at us. What was interesting is when we were done playing, you know, everyone came up, of course, and they want to see the gear, and they didn't know we had improvised at all. And so that was like mind blowing to people, which I thought was really funny. I don't know what I was thinking, if I didn't realize I needed to warn everyone, or if I was secretly thinking it would be really fun.
So they weren't throwing bottles at you then, or booing you off the stage or anything like that?
Thankfully,
it was in New York City, so there's a bit of an open-minded.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
They weren't too thrown by it, but I think maybe they were waiting for the songs to start.
Yeah.
You know, thinking this was some sort of like weird intro that just went on for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that was the experience. And then when it was over, they were like, "What did we just experience?" Which I like to surprise people. So that was probably pretty cool for me. So we were doing that. We had played in the Smithsonian Art Museum, doing this improvised style. And so we had kind of started doing that, and then ended up, during this era where we ended up on separate coasts of the US doing different work. So we were apart for a while. Which really doesn't bode well for working on improvised live music if we're not in the same space together. So we're kind of like in this rebuilding space now, where we had been living in New York, and now we've gotten a house out here in the country where we can just have our studio and have more space. And so starting to, practice performing again. And so we do a lot of live streams, a lot of different, like we said, we do the drone. We were doing improvised live streams for a little while. And now, so I guess the next big performance for us is going to be at Synth Booth, which is in October.
Yeah, I've seen something about that come through very recently. I saw some news of something called Synth Booth.
Yeah, it's starting to crop up.
Yeah, I wonder whether I can find it. as a link for people.
I think it's
I would
just
hope it's easy to find.
synthbooth.com,
They've
actually.
done their job.
That's
But
crazy
I think,
that such a thing can exist. Such a
I
URL can
know.
exist at this time. Let me stick that up.
It sounds like
know.
something that's always existed, but it's actually their first year doing it.
Because there's plenty of synth fests and plenty of super booths, you see. So that's
Yes,
that's sneaky.
exactly.
They took
Snuck
it
in
to,
there.
very wise.
yeah, it's very clever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty cool. So it's going to be a virtual festival, or I'm not sure if they're calling it a festival because it's a lot more like workshops and lectures
Mhm.
and just a
It's
few
an event.
a few performers.
I think they're calling it an event.
So the way it's been explained to us, yeah, it's going to be on an app that you can then sort of like choose what things you're going to see. But I actually think it's pretty cool because of all the festivals I've gone to, you always end up missing something because you can't see
Yes.
things that are happening at the same time, or you get too tired because you've gone to too many things in the day. So having it be virtual through an app where you're still able to, you can comment and you can watch it, the replay, I think is pretty cool. So I'm excited to see, how they pull it off. Suzanne Ciani is going to be a keynote speaker, and I think they've done a pretty good job pulling together a variety of pretty cool workshops and things. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
I think there's going to be
a
a maker workshop side to it as well. Like it's not just performers; it's also like people involved in the DIY community and manufacturers of modules. AI synthesis is definitely involved in one of the major.
I don't have the
components.
list here to see who's all involved, but it's definitely more interactive for the festival goer.
Well, that's great. I mean, our experience of Super Booth this year, because many of us covered it, many of us YouTubers covered it, is that actually it's the sort of experience that people have anyway, because not everyone can travel to these shows. And so for many people, their show experience, whether it's NAMM or Super Booth or whatever, is the little videos that news outlets do and YouTubers do. So it's actually no different from their point of view.
Right.
They spend a weekend with a bunch of beer and sit there and absorb the flow of content. So yeah, it's good. And if it's a little bit better because it's curated and it's looked after a little bit, then so much the better,
There's going to be Super Booth parties, like Super Bowl parties. Here with American football, we have the Super Bowl party. There's going to be like Super Booth parties where we're all just, hopefully in a new era, we can get together and,
we'll get together, but still be doing
enjoy a few beers and watch the synth booth on the computer or on the big screen together. But yeah, it's one of those. It's kind of like, I guess, almost like a mini synth booth or Super Booth in a way. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
We're excited to do that.
So when you improvise, talk me through how that starts. Is that an unpatched beginning, or do you sit there with a box of equipment and decide what to take out? How much of it comes ready to go?
I think, it's always evolving. So sometimes it will be like, I've been working on this idea. I want to bring it to, some improv time that we have together. Sometimes it will be like, what is the setup? Let's figure out what the setup is. And then sort of like, what's our sandbox? What are the tools in here that we're going to play with? But then make sure that we aren't coming with any like preconceived, ideas. So maybe, it is started fairly unpatched and it builds, but maybe you want to speak to that point?
I didn't mean to interrupt your flow,
Sorry.
but I like to completely unpatch every time. I mean, I pretty much rip out the patch cables every time I address the synthesizer. To me, it being patched overwhelms me. One of the reasons I've avoided I was kind of going through the different Buchla systems, and one of the reasons I avoid the E system is because it's kind of a preset storage system where they've figured out a way to actually like save presets in the modular, which to some would sound amazing, but to me that sounds like a plugin, and I do not like that at all. I'd rather just unpatch. I want things to sort of be exactly as they are. I do have one E module, and it's kind of a pain because like I have like one preset that you can store with the module, but it always boots up that way. And so sometimes I'll like start patching it and see the knob in one position and realize like, oh, I have to reset this because it's, you know, booted up in a different position. And, you know, I'd rather just
It's,
like have
yeah, it's
everything be
no longer
exactly
showing
the way.
you what it's showing you. Is that what you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And aside from the easel, Buchla doesn't really make any modules like that. Like you have to go the clone route, if you will, to get a real time. What you see is what you get. Analog module, you know, in the Buchla world, which is kind of why I went that direction. So yeah, we like to start out unpatched. I think it's part of the spirit of improvisation. Part of the charm, you know, for me is to just start fresh. And, you know, I think a lot of our jams that turned into our forthcoming album, you know, there was a lot of like whatever we were going through or feeling that day or that morning. A lot of it was done very early in the morning, believe it or not. We had a ritual of getting up every day at like, you know, 5:30 and going to this like off-site rehearsal space that we had wrangled, and, you know, starting fresh, you know, with like a meditation, and then leading right into, you know, an improvisation session that, you know, turned into these, you know, full songs.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
And
thinking back on that.
Yeah, that time period was very magical in that sense. So, you know, for me personally, I like to start fresh. I don't like to have something sort of like already going, you know.
Yeah, it sort of like clouds the space too much.
I almost want to see like, you know, what will happen if I patch something and I've had a long night and I mess up, you know, like I plug something into the wrong thing. You know, it's hard to do that in Buchla because the control voltages and the audio are completely separate, which I like as well. You know, but, you know, I just like the idea of like, you know, nothing quite sounding the same every time you use it, you know, and so I embrace that rather than loathe it.
The mistakes are the music at that point.
Or there's no such thing as a mistake.
Right. So whatever we're doing becomes, oh, this is what it is now. Follow that. Got to go that direction. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And that's kind of.
In tape, that's one of the reasons why we like tape so much, is because you kind of have to embrace that, you know, side of things to put up with tape. You know, I guess it's all about mindset. Like if you're looking at tape as being this thing that it was very hard to like get the same tone or the sound, or, you know, like things are off in terms of frequency response, and, you know, if you don't clean the heads, it's going to sound dirty. And like, you know, if all these things were something you were going to be fighting against constantly, I would say don't use it. You know, it would drive you mad. You know, but if you look at it as something, you know, almost like this is what I look forward to about this medium, you know, then it, like, I can't really do the thing that we do without it at this point. You know, I couldn't imagine making the kind of music that we make. The
unpredictability.
With a computer.
Yeah. Also, it slows you down.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So
there's not as much immediacy, so you have to kind of wait.
The long answer is we definitely start fresh, I would say.
That was the question.
You might have things, ideas, like a lot of times I've seen you write like almost like little poems or bits.
Well, there was a period where I was taking other people's poems and we were improvising together, and I was doing sort of using almost like that as not a sound source, I guess, but how could I speak and sing and loop and turn this poem into, you know, I don't want to say like musique concrète, but that's sort of what's in my brain about it, is I'm using the words, they could be percussive, or I could be using a delay, or I could be looping and then reversing them, you know, and sort of playing with them almost like they are little bits of tape, but it's my sound creating, or my voice creating it. So in that sense, I would take another person's poetry, because then having to be in a flow where I'm improvising lyrics is sort of a different headspace that I have to be in, that I have to give a little bit more energy to. So it's not as easy for me to do that and be improvising with other sounds too at the same time. So usually I'm having to build things separately. And then if I want to get into a flow, like we keep bringing up our album, but we do have this album that we're putting out that we're crowdfunding for. And everything on that album was completely improvised lyrically in the moment and recorded to tape. So it's like it has even more like energy to it, because we knew whatever comes out of me is being recorded to tape, being printed to tape with this, like, if we're really happy with what's going on, and then I start singing something and it's not great. So there's something about that I feel like I perform better with that pressure.
Because you do. That's something.
It's like there's a part of my brain that turns off. I guess the overthinking or the worrying part turns off, because I have to just be there, and it just puts me in this completely different zone. Yeah, I don't know if that comes from like the theater side of my training.
You have a natural ability in that regard. I've had to work really hard to be able to pull that off personally. Like I am not that way, and I tend to like get nervous and really like freeze up on stage and be in a place where like, I'll see like a recording or hear a recording of a show we've played, and I'm like, man, there is no feeling
I can't think of an example of that
in that solo whatsoever. Maybe you disagree, but I just like,
maybe it's what you thought you were doing versus what came out, but how would I know, because I'm not in your head?
Yeah, that's true. But
that's the other thing. Nobody really knows what you're trying to do. So,
but you're really good under pressure. I will say that, like, I've seen you shine in that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it is sort of almost becomes a problem though, because I have to somehow create those circumstances for myself to turn that part of my creativity on. So it's not always available, and so sometimes I have to like create the pressure.
Yeah. Well, that explains like getting the camera involved.
Yeah, we did. We started film. Well, to talk again about like destructiveness and not saving things and all that. When we first started improvising, we weren't recording it or filming it or anything. I mean, we did that for like a year, where we were just improvising, and then you walk away, and like, your perception of what happened is all you're left with, and who knows what it really was.
We were sort of building a muscle in that regard.
It was like, building up the muscle and getting used to it. And so, no pressure whatsoever, because you're just playing in the truest sense of that word. But then after so long, I was like, I do wonder what this is like for, listening back. So then we started filming it, because we had this performance, like I said, at the Smithsonian that we got asked to do. And so I was like, we should probably know how this is coming across. So we started filming it, and then I started taking bits of that and putting it on Instagram to sort of like see, add that next layer of pressure, show it to people. And it started creating this whole new audience for us that we didn't have before. And like similar to the drones, I was like, oh, wow, people really like this, but it's not the people I thought would, that sort of thing. I was really concerned we were going to alienate our psych pop fans. And I was trying to figure out how to push them into the deeper waters with us a little bit. But it opened us up to this whole other world. It was very, very supportive of what we were doing, because, it made sense to us, but we weren't sure it would make sense to anyone else. Because we were having a lot of fun. So I was like, oh, at what point do we share this with other people? Because then it stops being yours, right? Someone else experiences it.
Well, what you may not know, though, is like, meanwhile, like I was sort of keeping tabs on what was going on in the modular world and sort of realizing that there was an opportunity for things to line up in that regard, and kind of like steering us in that direction. Like, because, I would say that it's been really exciting for me to see modular kind of turn into what it has become. Like, I'm like sitting here on the sidelines, like, this is great. Like, I love that there's
huge community,
such a community developing around it, because, I've been a fan and enthusiast for a really long time, and have sort of fought against, like wanting to introduce these elements into sort of like a rock or a pop setting, and, have everybody walk out of the room, and be like, what is this, weird,
play the hits
stuff. Like, why are you, synthesizers are stupid.
I mean, no one thinks that.
Not anymore.
But you're right. There was a sort of a breaking point where it became more exciting and acceptable. And
tape music, like I see tons of people, making tape, loops and, doing things with tape now. Like, I never saw anybody
Instagram and
for
YouTube.
a long time.
in building that community and making it more accessible.
Yeah. And that's probably where, like, we've, in talking with other folks that have discovered our project, that's the era that you're talking about, when we started putting our bits from our improvisations on Instagram. That's, I think, where we started to raise a little bit of awareness.
Yeah, it might have had that same sort of like, you're scrolling, seeing something you're not used to seeing in your feed. So it might have been what drew the attention there, because it was weird.
Well, it was a couple tables of synthesizer stuff and some lights,
Yeah, we had all these colorful lights going. Doing these live performances with lighting. So,
well, we're easily distracted. Anything that looks interesting. Oh, it's got wires. Right. Let's have a good gander at that. I think is part of it. So let's talk about your Kickstarter project then. I've avoided it up to now. I haven't avoided it. I've just been talking about other things. But you made a quite extraordinary move to decide to. Well, initially, I'll let you tell it in a minute, but I'll tell my side of the story first. Yeah. Simply that, you started off this Kickstarter. You've got a new album coming out, and rather than sticking it on Bandcamp or iTunes or TuneCoring it or however it is that people do these days, you decided to release it on reel-to-reel, which is totally mad. Totally crazy. It seems like a complete bonkers idea. In fact, the last time I saw a reel-to-reel machine, of course, was probably Pulp Fiction. Someone actually playing music on a reel-to-reel.
I know that scene. Yeah.
So you go, oh, I can't. Does anyone have a reel-to-reel these days? So this idea that you were going to release this album on this format, and seemingly only this format to start with, was extraordinary. I had a poke around, and then realised I have no way of playing it, and that would be a shame. So, what was behind? Obviously you're into tape, like we get that, but what made you think that would ultimately be a good way forward?
Well, look at it.
There's
an appeal. There's an appeal to just having this as
getting to make like the full package. Yeah,
as
it's
a
our little
package.
prototype.
This is a fun, music lover's trinket, even if you don't have a way to play it. And, we were lucky enough to work with a graphic designer and artist,
yes.
Julian Montague, who we got to interview
He's a big
recently,
part of the project, I would say.
Live on Instagram. And he made, our artwork, which we get a lot of positive feedback about.
Oh, it's perfect. It's spot on. You nailed it, or he nailed it with the artwork. It's exactly
he does
these
he did a series of like fake book covers that look like they're from the 60s.
Oh, right.
You can't tell if they're real or not. It's fascinating. So we've been following him for a while and kind of like, I wonder if he'd work with us, and we reached out and it was a good fit. We have some of the same musical interests. So, to have him do the artwork was obviously like huge, and we're like, all right, let's get as much art out of him as we can. And we're just in this bubble with other people who also have reel-to-reel machines, and we're talking about tape all day. And so it didn't seem that weird to us to do this. We thought, well, if we're going to do it, of course we're doing digital. We have cassette, everyone always asks us to do cassettes. We love cassette. That's a really, immediate experience you can have. Most people who are into, cassette culture is just huge right now. But if we're really going to go for it, let's make something that is so special and so unique. It's like a piece of art in its own right, even though, most people, even if they buy vinyl, they're still going to stream the album or, put it on their digital playlists and things. So
that said, we love vinyl, so nothing against vinyl.
Yeah. It was just like, let's make something super unique, having no idea that when we released this and we announced this Kickstarter campaign, it created the most conversation I have ever seen about anything we've ever done. People are livid. They are absolutely beside themselves. How dare we put this out on reel to reel. I mean,
there's a very important bit too, though. Initially, we had wanted it to be a seamless listening experience.
That's true.
So
that's
we
true.
actually,
That's part of it too. So we pissed off the reel to reel enthusiasts as well as people who don't have reel to reel and wanted our album, I guess, because we picked a speed that was not the appropriate speed for the reel to reel enthusiasts.
3 3/4
Yes.
IPS.
How dare we?
To fit everything on one side.
So to play plays it slower so that you can fit everything onto one tape. Is that the idea?
An hour's worth of material.
Because it's a seamless experience. So we were like, we're doing tape, let's make it all on one side. So now, after having lots of conversations with everyone, it's now going to be released on 7.5 IPS. You know, that's what they want, but now they're gonna have to flip the tape. It's fine. But I could not believe, but the enthusiasm for it as well was just as passionate. So we've had quite a, enthusiastic response and support for the reel to reel, but we knew it would be pretty niche. And what we didn't expect, though, was people being like, oh, I wanted this. If you're going to do this, I wanted it in quad, so I'm not going to get it. And things like that, it was like, oh, my goodness. We even upset.
We kind of opened up a can of worms.
Do have reel to reel. Like, but each person has their own, like, well, I have this machine and I want it this way, or, just too many specifications. So that's really blown us away. But the amount of conversation and just based on Facebook shares and the conversations that are happening between friends that people I don't even know, talking to each other about how crazy we are for putting this out on reel to reel was just, I found it very entertaining.
Well, there's no such thing as bad press, and
it was just fascinating to me that people would have the time. Who has the time?
Right.
To be upset about someone's Kickstarter, you don't even know them.
We get a lot of shares that were like, well, it's happened. Finally, someone went and thought, they could release their music on reel to reel. I was waiting for this day with all these tapes and these vinyls coming back into.
Yeah, people took it as an opportunity to make jokes about, other formats that we got to release things on.
Get a kick out of this, folks.
Yeah, I guess they found it funny, but we just took that as, they just wish they had a reel to reel machine, I guess.
Oh,
so
totally.
they could have this.
I mean, I guess it's too hipster. I guess for want of trying to pigeonhole it.
Yeah,
that's the vibe people get, because people enjoy taking that sort of stuff apart. I mean, it's part, unfortunately, well, I don't know, it's part of our synthesizer community, the freedom to dig into it and to point fingers and to say that this thing here is completely fine. This thing here, I know that's either too cool or too hipster, or it's something to do with the girlfriend who rejected me 20 years ago, or I've never been able to fit into that. I was never in the cool club, therefore it's interesting. I mean, it's an art thing, I guess.
Our drones are very controversial as well.
Our drones are very controversial. But it is. I've had a lot of people saying like, oh, this is art, this isn't music, and I'm like, what?
Or just
what does that mean?
We've just made people angry.
Yes, people are very angry by the drones.
They're like, this isn't music.
Mostly, I guess people are like, why don't you have 6 million wires and making like a dance beat or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
They're just very offended by it.
Or drone is nothing new under the sun. Why are you doing it and acting like it is?
Yeah.
And like you're doing
a lot of strong opinions on the internet. Who knew?
See, I find it quite hard to do drones well. It's something that I have to work at. It's something which takes a lot out of me to try to find a drone that works, a drone that doesn't drive me nuts. And that's I think that's it's an art form. I mean, I have a very wide experience of all sorts of things. I'm a man of the world of great wisdom, but when we start talking about music and we start talking about art as two different things, as they frequently are, I find it fascinating. It becomes more and more fascinating to me, because I find whenever I speak to people who have embraced music as an art form, it elevates the conversation. It brings it makes me feel that I can talk about music better. I feel like it becomes more articulate. There's something, because you're not pulling it down somehow. Art seems to bring things up and allows the idea that something can actually be cool, that something can actually emotionally affect us in ways that we don't normally describe when we're talking about music. We're talking about nuts and bolts of music. We're talking about voltages. We're talking about pitches and how things go together. And that's a different conversation. So, you know, someone like you, I mean, it's been fascinating listening to you, because you talk as if you live in a work of art somehow, and that's amazing. That just, you know, it opens my head up, and it's so enjoyable to hear people talk about music and synthesizers in this way, rather than in such a I don't know, patch this into that kind of way. If you know, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how you make me feel, man. That's how you make me feel. So yeah, but at the same time, the real thing, yes, completely mad. I get that, but also, wow, look, you're releasing it as the real. That's just the most amazing thing ever. But there's also a reality to that, and the reality is that the Kickstarter has only a few days to go and might not get there.
It does.
And that's sad.
We just hit the 50%.
Yeah, I think we just crossed over that. So we're getting there. And, you know, I know a lot of people, the psychology with the Kickstarter is you kind of wait to see how it's going to go, and then you throw in at the end. So the end tends to be the most exciting time anyway. But, you know, about, you know, a couple of days ago, actually, we were able to pull off the vinyl version.
Yes.
Is now available. It is a double album. It's very, you know, it's about an hour long.
You've got to turn it over 4 times, and I think that's a lot of turning over.
That's a lot of turns. And we got requests for it to be colored vinyl.
Yeah.
So it's blue and orange vinyl.
Perfect.
A double album, similar artwork to the reel-to-reel that we showed. So we're getting to show off even more artwork, even more surface area. And that seemed to be very exciting to most people. And so we're getting a lot of enthusiasm for the vinyl too, but it's interesting to see that like it didn't diminish the reel-to-reel enthusiasm at all. Like I thought like, oh, everyone's going to drop the reel-to-reel and go to vinyl, but now they're adding it. So now everybody wants all the formats. So I think we've hyped up reel-to-reel enough that now it's maybe a shred more acceptable and exciting for people, for the right people, I guess. But
I mean, the vinyl, from my point of view, makes a lot of sense because it allows me to partake in the deal, other than, as you say, buying it as an interesting object. And so I think that's brilliant. I mean, you said something interesting on Facebook recently, which was, I'm not entirely sure how it was meant. I don't know, maybe I'll let you expand on it a little bit.
I say all kinds of things. So
yeah. Because I don't know if it was a statement of truth or a realization or something, but you said, you know, we have 60,000 Facebook followers, 60,000 people, and all you're after is trying to launch a product that needs some support, and at the moment you have 100 backers, which in the scheme of things isn't a huge number, you know, and all you actually need is another 100 people to buy an album, and you've done it, and you've made it. You've more than crashed through your goal. It's not a lot to ask from 60,000 people, you know. And where are they? And how weird and interesting and crazy is it that we have these social media followings that are so hard to harness into anything constructive? How do you make these people, not make them, how do you, I don't know, how do you connect with people enough for them to actually act?
Gosh,
that's what I got. That's what I got from what you said. Yeah.
Well, that was your copy, so I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, let me take it. It's fine. I had this moment. It was late at night, of course. And I was sitting there looking at it going like, this is fascinating to me. And I know there's always a lot of talk about the fact that there's an algorithm and Facebook is only showing things to a certain number of people. So from what I understand, it is, because we're posting from a Facebook page, which is different than your personal profile, and they don't really care. They don't really cater to the pages as much, but that's where we are. You post something, and then the algorithm will show it to a couple people that it thinks might react to it. And if those people don't react to it, or comment or share or anything, then it just doesn't show it to any more people. So it might show it to 10 people or 100 people or something like that. And it sort of tests the waters to see how it's going. And then, so it's sort of this weird way to think about communicating with people, because you want to just think, okay, 60,000 people have decided that they care enough about what we're doing to have it be something that comes through their feed. because once you like a page, it's going to come through your feed.
Yes.
But they maybe, you know, it's not top of mind because there's so many other things going on in the world, so it's not coming through their feed as much. But I would prefer if, you know, these people are interested and I'm doing what I'm doing and they're interested, and we can just have this direct kind of communication where they can tell me things and we can have conversations about stuff. We can share music with them. And it turns out that there's just, you know, a small group, and this is true of any group of people in any setting, not just on the internet. There's going to be 1% to 2% of people that show up and engage all the time and kind of speak for the rest of everyone else who's just lurking. I tend to be a lurker, so I have had to like work on that a little bit. My nature is to just let everybody else have, you know, do their reactions and I'll just watch. But to actually engage is, you know, kind of putting your imprint on the internet forever. So that's always interesting to think about too. But yeah, it is, I think your question was, how do you motivate those people? And why is it that if we have all of these followers on all these social media sites, and they Augustus likes to call it verbal tipping, they will comment or share our posts with, I love this music, I love this vinyl, or I want to get this, or everyone should support this. And then that's the end of it. They don't actually do the supporting.
Take the action.
So it's really interesting because I think the platform also dictates how you interact, right? So Facebook wants you to stay on Facebook. YouTube wants you to stay on YouTube, all these kinds of things. So to try to talk to the people where they are, you know, we have 60,000 people on Facebook. That's where they are. That's where I want to talk to them. To then have them go to Kickstarter is also a disconnect because Facebook doesn't want them to leave Facebook. It's a little devious, but that's the truth. So, you know, sharing as much of the music from the album as we can without just saying like, here's the album, right? Because then, you know, what's the point?
Speaking of which, there is a YouTube trailer.
Yes.
That we haven't talked about yet, but that we basically just took like a small snippet of each song on the album and did a little trailer video. So you know, that's something people could check out if they wanted to get a taste of the album. Anyway.
Yeah, but it was interesting because when I did post that, I thought, well, this is just simple math. If all these people who are verbally tipping us, or all these people who say they're interested, or they tune into our weekly drones, or you know, people specifically said, we want more music from you. I did all these polls. They want more music and they want vinyl and all these things. Okay, let's do that. That's what the people want. Give them what they want. $1 from 60,000 people, like you said, it's just math. It's just math. What's the disconnect? So it was interesting because we did end up getting a lot of support, a lot of people saying like, oh, I'm going to give you more than $1. You know, I want the album. Let me get it. And it just makes me think like, oh, have they really not seen that we're putting out a new album? Have they really not seen all of the posts and
then
things?
How do you explain the email list?
Well, yes, we do also have an email list. Which,
so talk about like direct, you know, conversation. Like,
I think I also wonder if it's just
ratio with our email.
I mean, that's just that's all typical stuff there. But I do often wonder if it's the way things have been done up until now. Now we live in this world where everything's inside out and upside down, and it's just everything is different. You know, the algorithm is broken and the way people want to be talked to is different. And,
got the election coming up in our
all
country.
Of this madness that is happening, and it's just changed our brains and our day-to-day life, and what our problems are different, and where we are, how we're experiencing music is different. So it's been really a weird time to be putting out new music and to be running a Kickstarter.
Yeah, but, maybe, but it also reflects on it's the same old problems of how do you get heard, how do people hear about you. That seems to be the one thing that has never changed, regardless of who's running the music industry, or whether it's doing it ourselves or doing it through a label. It's that thing about getting heard. It's you know, the fascination of social media that. In some ways it's very disheartening, because it makes you think that even if I did put an album out, I'm not going to reach anybody. Why am I trying to reach anybody? What is it that I'm expecting from this reach? And what transactions are there that I'm expecting to happen? I mean, I mean, for those of us who work in YouTube, it's a constant source of a sort of frustration and mystery. Everybody does want you to do stuff. Everybody is happy to receive the content. You know, it's just when you're asking just for more than a passive view, it's difficult. It is hard out there, you know. And
and I don't want to discount. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to put an encouragement out there to anyone who's watching this. Then it's you've only got till Monday, I think, left, and if
early Tuesday, yeah.
So if you do fancy,
we can call it Monday.
Yeah. So I would just encourage you to certainly consider supporting this, because the music is superb. You are lovely people. I've enjoyed talking to you this evening, and it could be an awesome thing to have in your record collection. And if you don't like it, sell it on or something. I don't know, but you know, consider supporting, and you have to do it quickly, because if with Kickstarter, if you don't hit your goal, then nobody gets anything. I mean, also, you know, you can obviously then release your album however you wish in some other form, but it's not going to be to the level that you could do it with the right sort of funding, you know. So
exactly,
yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough, and I really do feel for you, and I hope that whatever happens, that it's a positive experience ultimately. I mean, you've spent a year making awesome music. I mean, you mustn't forget the journey.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I don't want to discount the absolute positive experience that we've had. There is obviously a deadline. If we don't reach our goal, we don't get to put this album out on these beautiful formats. But the people who have shown up beyond our expectations, to be honest. Like, they've blown us away, and how much they are reaching out to have personal conversations with us. And that's what we really care about. You know, we're not out here just trying to sell music. You know, we actually have really wonderful relationships with the people that we get to connect with, because we're putting music out and we're putting ourselves out there so much. We end up meeting people who absolutely inspire us and encourage us, and also are artists in their own right, or have passions that, you know, align with ours. Like, we're super into retro sci-fi, and we tend to meet a lot of people who give us a lot of good recommendations in that regard. And so it's just really fun to have conversations with people that, you know, we're on the same wavelength, or we're helping each other get to a place we want to get to. And so there's been a ton of that. Like, if, you know, for us, like, we've already succeeded. We've already won.
Right. There was a time when, you know, we were lucky if like some of our close friends would be at a live show, you know, and that was it, you know, and it's like us and the bartender hanging out, and we're trying to, like, we're having that awkward, like, hey, see, there's a couple people.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Had plenty of that.
Yeah,
So
we all experienced that, I could tell you. Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
It's a rite of passage.
The people who have shown up are, you know, they're very much
people in Japan and
outside
Austria
of our friends and family sphere,
just,
you know,
all over the world, just loving what we do. Because, like, if you get what we're about, it's, you know, there's a passionate connection there with the influences and the type of music that we're making. It's not for the Spotify, you know, algorithm playlist maker. It's, you know, maybe we'll make our own. We'll force it.
I'm always hoping.
But, you know, if you are super into early electronic music and analog synthesized music, and you know, retro sci-fi is such a big influence for us, the soundtracks of those movies, that, you know, when you hear it, you hear our music, and if you're into that, like, there's a connection there that it doesn't have to be sold, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, if you get it. So it's really, I think the frustration comes with, there's, you know, probably only 1 billion or 2 billion people on the internet. And, you know, how do you connect with those right people? Because they're there. So it's just the game is always putting the right thing out there to the right people in the right place. Because once you find each other, you know, then everyone's happy. But yeah, it's been a really positive experience. It's just this sort of, you set the goal based on what you think you're going to do and what you need to do. Because obviously we have certain minimums to meet to make vinyl, and, you know, we have music videos we want to make.
Yeah, we didn't choose an arbitrary amount.
It was all very calculated. So, you know, you have a deadline, and you have to motivate people by that deadline. So that's really, that's the test. And we have 4 days left, and we expect that the procrastinators are going to show up, because the people who are supporting it are so passionate and excited about it. And like, we're getting messages every day, like, we can do this. We're going to make it. I threw in another $5. Like, let's get there. So,
Yeah, well, that's nice.
It may not be the mass, but
yeah, you just need a few more of those. I mean, it's interesting what you say about it not being for the Spotify algorithm. I remember, I've released a few meditation albums in my time, and the tracks were like 15 minutes long. And so I'd sell the album for a tenner on iTunes, but each individual track, of which there were 4, were 79 cents each. And it's like, it just doesn't work. You can buy the whole thing for $2, and I'm trying to sell you the thing for a tenner. So, there has to be a space where we can enjoy the more long form ideas and things like that. There has to be a way to do it.
Yeah, we have some like 10 minute tracks on the
that's going to be
album.
interesting once it's on. Oh, that's so bizarre. I hadn't thought of that.
Not much drone, that I would consider drone, but definitely some longer songs that take a very long time to develop, that would try the average pop music listener's attention span, to a very high degree.
Yeah, but I think we're all on the same page here about being,
yeah, I mean, soundtrack, I suppose, is the one genre that throws itself out often when in terms of long form music. People have the opportunity to write soundtracks to movies and bits and pieces, or having those sorts of things crash together, because you don't necessarily write to picture. But
it's so cinematic. We've heard that before.
Oh, yes. Yes, it could be. It could be. We just need a lot more Stranger Things type series, I suppose.
There we go.
Have you been to cinema recently? Have you seen Tenet by any chance?
Oh no, I don't think
the
we're
music in that
allowed
was
to
extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. But anyway, that's
Has
a
it been
complete side.
released in the US? I know, we could talk about movies for another hour.
Yeah, that's another thing. Somebody asked whether they can ask questions in the chat, so maybe I'll throw a couple of badly formed ideas at you from people as time is getting on. So I've got to try to navigate this, try to focus with my eyes. So Alan asks, would you consider the Arturia Buchla V to be a good place to start with Buchla?
Absolutely. So, I'm not one that would, despite the fact that I seem like the most, analog, sort of enthusiast that, I definitely think there are a lot of really good plugins out there. I really like the soft tube versions of the Buchla stuff. I think modular sounds really good. And I had a very long background with computer stuff. So I think of it sort of as like video games. Like, I'll take it with me on a trip or something like that, and, have a great time in the airport on Ableton, with some modular synth plugins. VC Eurorack is very good. But yeah, I demoed the Arturia version, and I thought that there were a lot of elements, at least the workflow is there. There's something about the immediacy of the hardware that is absolutely missing.
Yes.
But I would say that if you are able to get over that, and, all you've really had is the software experience, with most analog synth plugins and things, that, yeah, it's definitely, the way to go. I mean, I wouldn't shy away from it. And you definitely get into the Buchla world of, how that module works, which I said is sort of like the gateway to understanding the whole system. So yeah, go for it.
Well, definitely. I think we've all discovered the software hardware switch now. I think there's less people who have still got to come on board with that idea. I think you can choose to stay with software, and that's an okay life choice. If that's your lifestyle, that's okay. But for many of us, as soon as we get our hands back on those knobs, it's game over for software. It has to be. There's nothing quite the same. And I've built PC studios, PC computers, Windows computers for studios for 20 years, 25 years maybe.
Oh, wow.
So that's been up until 3-4 years ago. That was my bag. My bag was in the box. I was the in the box man. So it's been quite revelatory to come out and transition. Cool, all these weird words coming in now. I'm coming out and I'm transitioning towards hardware. But that is how it is. It is a life-changing experience, I think. Anyway, I'm digressing into my own story when I should be asking questions of other people.
What was the name of your company when you built PCs?
It's been in 3 companies. I started off as Carillon Audio Systems. We sort of built the original audio PC back in 2000.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very familiar. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we even ported that to the USA, and that ran for quite a while. Then I left that and set up with a company called Rain Recording, which was also in the States, but I ran the UK operation of that. And then more recently, which is now 6, am I coming up on 7 years this year? Oh my God, as Molten Music Technology. So I've only really stopped doing it I've probably been this is probably going to be my first clear year without having built a computer. I've now transitioned, as I say, into doing YouTube, writing reviews, things like that, as opposed to building computers, which is a far better job, I have to say. What was I doing for nearly 30 years? That's nuts. But anyway, so I've left that behind now. But it's still very much part of what I talk about, software and interfaces and all those sorts of things. But I'm happy to talk about it now rather than having to build it and support it. Building and supporting, that's a thing you don't ever want to do. So Andrew asked whether you play live gigs. I think we've already answered that, Andrew. How late is it for you to come in? Have you just turned up, Andrew? Is that what it is?
Well, I will say that when we were talking about that, the one point that I wanted to make very clear is that was completely our experience, before going the improvisation, and it was almost like we
were a touring band for sure.
Yeah, that was our bag. Like we definitely cut our teeth, in many smelly bar, gig situations. Yeah.
What city are you in currently? You said you were in. You told me. I've forgotten. It's someplace totally forgettable. I think it was.
Totally. That's the point. Absolutely, we nailed it.
Near Chicago, more. I mean,
we're in between Chicago and Detroit, in a little town.
Okay.
Hiding away.
Yeah. So Midwest United States, Northern Indiana.
Somebody asked, this could be a personal question. What money is missing between what you have been pledged and where you need to go?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't checked it since.
About $5,000.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Unless something insane happened while we were talking, which I would be very open to. But.
Yeah, no, I mean, according to the page I got open here.
Okay, you've got it.
You've got exactly 100 backers, which is interesting, and £4,100, which doesn't mean anything to you, of £7,906 goal. So you're just over halfway, or $5.5 grand of 10.5 goal. So yeah. Does one get shares? David asks.
What does that mean?
No, I don't know. What happens with Kickstarter is that you essentially buy a product which is there as your pledge. So you promise to buy a product, and if they reach the goal of enough promises, then you actually have to buy it. So that's really the idea. And
nothing happens unless we meet our goal.
Yeah, so you pledge the money. People will say like, oh, I'm waiting till payday. And it's like, well, you're actually not spending any money.
Yeah,
you're pledging an amount and you choose a reward to get. So it could be the cassette, the vinyl, the reel-to-reel, the bundles. We actually just threw a new reward on today, private synth lessons with Augustus, which you can get as well. People are always asking for that. So 30 minutes one-on-one over Zoom with Augustus is one of the options. So you can kind of put these together however, if you message us. We've done a lot of customizing of this, but there's a lot of bundles and options, and get the music, support us. You can also just choose to pledge an amount with no reward. But the deal is that, you're getting something for your money, as well as supporting us to continue to make our art and make more videos and all kinds of fun stuff we want to do. And then if we reach our goal, then it'll charge you that money that you pledged. But if we don't, then it's like you never pledged it.
Yeah.
So that's the deal.
Yeah, it can work as well, because there was a Kickstarter recently called the Sweet 16, I think it was, Eurorack sequencer, and they were struggling to get over the line. And so I, against my own better judgment, had to buy one just because I wanted to see him get over the line. And then he did, and then I've had to buy it. And it's like, I just don't need another sequencer, but damn it. I was really into what he was doing and just wanted to, I'll write it off against tax or something. Who knows? But
yeah, you can do that.
You've just got to get. I'm a bit of a Kickstarter addict. I think it's starting to be a bit of a problem. But
yeah, you can really have some fun on there. People are doing really interesting things.
Yeah, I got into the Coma electronic field kit by way of Kickstarter.
Oh yeah,
Like that was the main Kickstarter that I backed, that I was really excited about. Jacqueline actually told me about it initially.
I don't know where I saw it, but
it caught your eye. I wouldn't have known
about
about it but it caught her eye, and she was like, "Hey, I think this is the kind of thing you would be into. It's talking about electromagnetic, processes and contact mics and stuff." And
yeah, we use that a lot on the new album.
So I backed the Kickstarter, and anytime you hear like something that sounds like a crackly radio, like that's the CV radio on the field kit. But I got in on that and bought like a kit version and built it. I'm really into doing like building kits and things. So that was like one of the early ones actually that I did. And so I sort of became, I guess, privy to the idea that Kickstarter was a place you could go and support gear projects by way of the Coma electronic field kit.
Yeah, nice. That's a lot of fun, that box, I think. A lot of fun. Mr. What's it? No, David, who was asking about the money side of things, says, can one buy a share in future profits? Which is an interesting lawyer-type question, I think.
That is quite the question. So the idea for this is that it's not really... It's because we've done a lot of the work already, so we're sort of trying to cover the costs of what it was to make the album and pay the artists that we worked with. So profit doesn't really come into it as much. More this is what it costs to make this project happen, and then you get the reward out of it. So we're covering the costs of making these things.
Yeah.
I don't know how to really answer that.
No. I mean, I think David, honestly, if you're interested in working with the Galaxy Electric, you should just get in touch with them. I'm sure that's probably the best approach with those sorts of things. What else was there? Yeah, Andrew, no worries, mate. What's the white box behind you? I think there's a white window. Thinking of it, unless it's the chair or it's the.
Okay.
There's
I don't know
chair.
what it looks like.
There's a.
Does it look white? It's silver, but maybe it looks white.
There's a white curtain.
So the Buchla system we've been describing is perhaps the white box.
Yeah, maybe the one that's up.
Yeah.
So all the modules we were listing off earlier are in that box.
Well, like I said, I'm anticipating a larger case. I can't fit all of my modulars and my modules in there currently, so it's just sort of a selection. I'm constantly having to take things out and put things in for different setups or different ways we want to approach something that we're doing recently. So I'm very excited to get the case that allows me to keep everything all in one spot. But I'm sure that people have experienced that before. There's a lot of cases out there that involve sort of like a turnaround time building the thing. And, so I have one of those situations. But, someday soon I will have a lot more space. And I'll actually have some blank space, which will be a nice problem to have.
It won't stay, though. The blank space has, it's transient. It's like people who design lovely blanks for Eurorack. It's like, that's lovely, but it's not going to stay, is it? I'll put it in, and then the next day it'll be out, and I'll be putting other stuff in, and it'll be. We actually
sell blank panels for Buchla. I designed some red and blue because there were no colored panels out there. There were only like the brushed aluminum, like the actual modules, and so. I was like, you know what, I'll just print. I want these for my own case, so I'll just print some extras and sell them. They're on Reverb, they're on our website. If anybody needs blank Buchla panels.
See, that's another difference, though. I kind of get the impression that Buchla systems grow slowly at a sedate pace, whereas Eurorack is, put that one in there, that's going to go in there, that's going to change that around. Yeah, that's much more. Eurorack is that kind of kind of thing, as opposed to Buchla being very laid back, and that's just the impression we get, I think.
It took me a while to even expand my first module outside of the easel. So yeah, it has grown a lot slower. You know?
Somebody, Pablo asks about AI. How do you feel about AI composed musica? Is that a thing? I don't know. Or AI composing music, I suppose. We've had a bit of that.
How do we
around
feel
lately.
about it?
I personally, I love it. It's, to me, that is what the technology behind the source of uncertainty module, which is like the main random source of control voltage in the Buchla system, and Turing machine and Eurorack, you know, is a good one. There are lots of random, you know, AI, if you will, you know, generators, you know.
Well, it also reminds me of like what Tomita was doing.
Yeah. Oh, that is a great example. You should talk about that a little bit.
Stuff. Yeah. He was, you know, most famous for doing his Moog albums that were pseudo covers of classical music back in the 70s and 80s. But then towards the end, I don't think he's alive, right? Is he alive? I don't want to put him in the grave if he's not there already.
Tomita? I think he is.
He was working with this company that created this like Japanese like pop star that's a hologram.
Okay, yeah.
And he worked with them on creating the AI behind the music. So it's really, really strange. And she performs with like orchestras, but she's a hologram. I think it's actually quite, you know, fascinating, because I'm used to seeing that kind of stuff being very like glitchy, you know, not really working that great. But they've nailed it. So it's all over the internet, because once you start going down that path, you find that she is a brand, this hologram superstar. But he's actually,
I think Roland Boss did like a guitar pedal of this character that you talk about.
I can't remember her name.
I don't remember her name either. But
I'd have to look it up.
Great
again.
example.
But
no,
yeah, but
I think Tomita did pass away like a couple years ago.
Yeah, someone said that in the chat. Funny enough.
Yeah. They probably know more than I do about it. But that is not the kind of music I'm going to listen to, because it is pretty much the antithesis of tape music. But for, you know, aesthetically and philosophically, like why I like it. But I don't think that we should, you know, put a stop to it or anything. I think it's fascinating.
And in a way, like the tape process is there is, in my opinion, like sort of like an artificial intelligence involved in the uncertainty of, you know, just randomly cutting up tape. And, you know, I don't know.
Interesting.
There's like a metaphysical artificial intelligence in that process for me.
I find it a little sterile. So I don't know. We'll see how it develops, because I know it's going to happen.
That's very deep for this time of night. For me, I mean, it must be getting near tea time for you. I imagine.
Exactly. I know. We're time travelers, I always say, when we're talking across time zones.
JUVF Mastering wants to know what tape machine you use, and what's tape and what speed. Tape speed machine.
So the machine that we recorded the album to is
there's a lot of answers to that question.
You can see the black reel, like just the like little
I'm trying to move up.
Shred of it. No. If you turn the other way, you can see it more. Yeah, there you go. Next to the console.
See the little edge of it there next to the console.
That's the TIAC A3440. It's a 4-track, quarter-inch, quarter-track machine, and
we did 7.5, right?
15.
Oh, we did.
We recorded at 15.
We're always arguing about
inches
it.
per second.
There it is. Look, I found it on the edge of the
shop.
shop.
You can move us around.
Look,
there it is.
Go.
Yeah.
We're always arguing about the speed, because you know, you get certain qualities from each one that we sometimes want for different things. But for this album that we're putting out, we recorded it at 15.
Yeah.
And we're releasing it on 7.5.
No. Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
That is correct. But here, let me move the other way. And then we've been making some tape loops with this guy, which is the Akai
202DSS. It's a quad machine as well, but it doesn't have the ability to like overdub basically. You can't listen to like tracks 1 and 2 while you record on a track 3. You have to record them all at one time if you want to do 2 or 4 tracks. But one of the cool things about this one is that it's got a manual auto reverse. So you can actually, like, you know, in 2-channel mode, you can hit the auto reverse button and hear what's on the other side of the tape. So I've been messing around with sensing foils, which is how it kind of does it automatically. And you can put the foil on one side of the tape and the other. And it takes a couple of seconds to switch over, but you can kind of incorporate that into the music by like using a delay or something. But you can have like 2 totally different sounds on each side of the tape and have them sort of flip-flop in between one another with sensing foil. And so it's like some kind of a manual process of, if you remember when samplers like have the ability to reverse back and forth through a loop, you know, like it kind of emulates that sound.
Do you use any sampling now, or is it all gone analog? Yeah,
we don't have any. I would say the closest thing I have to a sampler is the, I don't know if you're familiar with the Monome DIY project called Shields. It's kind of a DIY take on
the very glowy dials. Is that in the Monome?
Lights, yeah, yes. Dials and light and the grid,
that's right.
the buttons.
Yeah, that's right. And, beautiful things.
And so, yeah, very cool. But they have this thing called the Norns, which is basically like an open source Linux based computer. Like, you know, right, I would say it's focused on audio stuff, but you can do all kinds of stuff with it. But they have like a DIY version, and I've kind of taken to building those, and, you know, keep one, sell one, you know, like sort of thing. And so we use the applications in that from time to time. That's probably
closest thing sampling
that we have going on. And once again, it's kind of like there's a lot of things in it that you might use a computer plug-in for, but it's nice to have it outside of the box. It's almost like its own little independent computer.
I know you can't see it.
Sound computer.
Like it's back there.
It's small. Yeah, it's very small.
Cool. Well, I don't think there's any other sense we're going to get out of anybody in the chat this evening.
I love knowing it's so late themselves.
There. Yeah. Influences. Well, I mean, we've talked about quite a few, I think, over the course. But any particular people you're listening to at the moment, perhaps? Maybe that would be.
Oh my goodness, I've just gone on a bit of this Bandcamp Friday thing has me going on these tape sprees. I just can't stop buying music. So I've been buying a lot of music that I think would probably fall into like a library music category, but it's new music that's being made. But it has that vibe. Like I have one that I'm excited about. It's not here yet, but a friend of ours who has a label, he does a million projects, always doing something with somebody. But he's doing this new series of aquatic library music. Wow. I guess this was a thing in the 70s. So it's very, very, very niche library style music. I tend to like things that sound like they have their own like world to them, but maybe it's not real, you know, like it wasn't a movie soundtrack, or it's not really anything that was, you know, sort of like a made up version of I'm trying to think of like Scar folk, if you know what that is, the like fake graphic design of
I know some ska and I know some folk, but I never thought of putting those two together necessarily, although one could argue that folk music ultimately becomes ska at some point in the 80s.
Oh, not ska, scar.
Yeah, okay. I know, I'm just messing with you.
Are you messing with me? Oh, I love it. Please. So yeah, that's what I've been into. But in terms of influences, we are always listening to things from the past that maybe are new to us, or maybe didn't get, you know, a big mainstream push at the time, you know? Just keeping it living on.
Yeah. We recently we're fans of Miracle Pond label. What are some other ones? Russian Library. We just were talking about the stuff today, actually, on Facebook, but like
or folklore tapes.
Yeah,
I'm always listening to what they're
big
doing.
fan of the folklore tapes
recently.
project. I was trying to avoid talking about that because I feel like
we talk about them a lot.
Talked
but
about
they do.
them a
They
lot
create this
publicly.
world for you where it's like bits of reality and bits of the past and bits of made up, story, and you get to kind of escape into this world that the music is creating. It's not just the music; it's art.
Yeah.
Controversial. I didn't know to make music art. But there it is.
But that's you too, though, isn't it? That's you. That's what this album is. It's an escape off planet. It's a journey to a new space age fantasy. One could say.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's what we were going for. That's what we wanted to create. Because that's where we want to live, I guess.
Life on planet Zorb.
Create the world we want to live in.
Yeah.
Or
be the world you want to live in, or live
there it is.
in the world you want to live in. Oh, it gets complicated, I think. Well, I think it's probably getting late, and we've done a good stint. We've done a couple of hours now on Dropouts, which is,
my goodness,
which
it
is
goes by
great.
so fast.
Yeah,
thank
that's
you so
awesome.
much.
So we'll bring it neatly to some kind of closure. But oh, look at that! You got 101 backers.
Thank you. If that was one of you, thank you so much.
It was worth it. There you go. Well, that's fantastic. I'm so pleased about that. So
it certainly was worth it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it's been lovely to talk to you. It's been totally fascinating because this is a world, the world of Buchla, world of tape is something that I'm only really discovering. It's something which I don't spend a lot of time in, and so it's fascinating. It's fascinating to talk about modular in a different way to how I'm normally running on about things which I, for some reason claim to think I might know something about. So it's great. I love the way it makes my brain expand, which is great. So thanks so much for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Do you think that there's a chance that you might venture down a Buchla pathway?
It's
with
possible.
Your own setup?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I have things to dabble with. For instance, I have a Lifeforms voltage lab from Pittsburgh.
Modular. Yeah, that's a great thing.
Which I haven't spent anywhere near enough time with yet. It's sort of, I play with it a bit and then I kind of put it to one side because I'm a busy person. I have other things to do. But that's something that I would like to spend more time with because that is a kind of carrier modulator type oscillator arrangement.
Yes,
with those sorts of
it's
function
very
generators.
West Coast.
Yeah, very West Coast. I did have a no coast at one time when I started off with this, but it didn't bring me the joy I thought it would. I needed to spend time in a familiar architecture, I think, so I could find my feet, I think. And it wasn't helping. It just kept sending me off into I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it makes the noise it does. But I think now that I've matured a little bit, it's going to be interesting to reapproach that. But I've got more than enough to talk about, with where I am at the minute. That's the problem. But I would like to. But if for no other reason than to so I can have a sensible, intelligent conversation with Mark Doty next time I see him. That's important to me for reasons I can't explain.
Well, if you'd like to chat more about starting on that journey, just send me a message. We can talk about it.
Well, thank you. I most certainly will. So yes, you've been watching Molten Chat this evening with the Galaxy Electric. Who have a few days left on their Kickstarter. Do go and check that out. The link is below and in the chat and things like that, and pick up some extraordinary cosmic music to while away the hours in our dying planet. That's a nice thought. So yes, thank you so much for being in the chat. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate your time, and we're going to wander off, I think. All
right. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, I've got to now just give me a second as I find the button. There'll be a button here somewhere amongst all this. So yes, thanks very much, and we'll be seeing you soon.
All right.
Cheers.